works. Kinda. Alright, so welcome back to the shop. After being out to the range, you notice that PM63 has a few little issues. They believe so too. So I wanted to go over what the issues are and how to rectify them. So don't worry about this. This is for another project. I'm going to reline this one, but I took this one out and shot it today. It's pretty cool for being a smooth bore. But anyways, so you'll notice in the video that this has a hard time ejecting. It doesn't have a hard time extracting, it just has a hard time ejecting. So the way that this firearm works is that on the bolt face and in the slide itself, there's a little trackway for, you know, every other pistol on the face of the earth has an ejector, right? But the ejector is not in the frame on the PM63. The ejector is on the magazine. This left side lip is the magazine, right? And you'll notice that these magazines are beat. Like, these things are beat up. And I kept noticing that in between mags, every single one of these left sides is bent a little bit differently, right? And no two of them are exactly alike. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get two very good condition magazines versus these ones. These came with the kit. These were the Gallows broken tab mags. And, you know, they're just beat up. They might be at the end of their service life. And also the floor plates have a nasty habit of popping off when you're trying to load them. But I'm going to try that. If not, if that doesn't rectify the situation, I'm going to start messing with these a lot more and see if that fixes the problem. Now the other problem you'll notice is that sometimes this thing likes to double tap on its own, right? So, like I was saying in the last video, there is a ton of shit for that little tiny sear spring to drive, right? So what's happening is that the trigger, the bar, the bushing for the trigger, the bushing at the rear of the sear itself, the sear and the disconnector are all being driven by two itty-bitty little teeny tiny springs, right? So what's happening is that while the hammer is held by the disconnector, the spring for the sear needs to pop up extremely fast in order to catch the hammer and leave it on the sear, right? But with all this extra shit that's been added for that spring to drive, what's happening is that everything is dragging it. So it's not getting enough spring tension to be able to pop up as fast as it should, right? So, let me take this apart. Let me show you. Alright, so there is our quote-unquote slide in our barrel. And then here is the guts of the actual mechanism itself. So you can see there's our trigger bar right there. Itty bitty litty tiny, right? So in my infinite wisdom, what I thought would really help to alleviate what I kind of already suspected was going to be a problem, at the very end of the original spring, or the recoil spring guide rod, it's open. So what I did was I found a spring, a coil spring, that was tapered, and I kind of put it in there, and it did add more spring tension to the trigger itself. But you can see without it, you know, you've got that much dead space travel, right? And then down inside here, this is the actual fire control group. So what's happening is that, let me drop the hammer. Underneath the sear, which is this part right here, there is a little tiny spring. I'm talking little tiny spring. And then underneath the disconnector back here, there is also another little teeny tiny spring that sits on top of the sear. With all of this extra crap that's in here right now, this bar, the bushing down on the trigger itself, the resistance between the trigger and the pin, the resistance between all these parts working together, that spring cannot operate fast enough. It needs to be a heavier wound spring, like a heavier spring tension spring. So what I'm going to do is that I have a secret weapon. I have a ton of springs. So what I'm going to do is try and find the one with the heaviest spring tension on there, the heaviest, you know, rate. I'm going to cut it down to a few coils longer than the original one that came with this trigger pack, and then attempt to try that. I'm also going to consult the box of springs and maybe some of the AK FCGs that I have, and see if I can find another spring to put a ton of tension, a ton of positive tension on this trigger. So I'm going to try and attempt those things and then go back to the range and see what happens. But unfortunately, that means I've got to pull that rivet out and you know, work on it and then rivet it back in. So all in all, I'm actually surprised that this works as much as it does, even though it's kind of temperamental. One big downside of this thing that I noticed while shooting it is that no matter what, when you've got this thing up to your face, you get a ton of blowback in your face. You get like burning powder, you know, all that sort of shit. And it's kind of unpleasant to shoot. But maybe that's just my mileage. I'm not sure. But yeah, the firing pin is working well, obviously. The hole for the hammer is perfect. The location of the hammer and the location of the FCG is perfect. You can see that the hammer had to be reprofiled just a little bit in order to have the slide go over it and reciprocate nice and easily. So all in all, it's not too bad. Really, the main problems are the ejection, which is caused by this misformed left lip, because you can see these two right here, the two shorter ones are the feed lips. This is your ejector lip. And that's why this is not working correctly, because all of these are bent out of shape and I don't know what they're supposed to look like. And then the sear spring, which I already kind of figured was going to be an issue, but I was trying to stay positive, because that is the same exact problem as what was going wrong with the 4352. These trigger packs, maybe it's just the way that I build, but these trigger packs never have enough spring tension in them, whether it be on the hammers or the sears. So, you know, a little something you got to tinker with, a little something you got to deal with. Maybe it's just my designs. I have no clue. But in my practice, that's what I've noticed. So, all in all, not a bad range trip. So, you know, stick around, stay tuned, and we'll see if we can get this thing running correctly. Thanks for watching. Happy building.